everybody to St. Pete Timebank's video anthology series, Timebanking Tales, a Storybank. Today, I have with me Rita Cobbs of Tampa Bay Timebank. Rita has been a member for over 9 years now and is also a member of Spring Hill Timebank. So welcome, Rita. How are you
Thank you, BJ. Good to see you.
Again, right? We see each other
Right.
more often lately than we have in a while. So tell the people that are listening, Rita, a little bit about you. Who is Rita Cobbs? What do you want us to know?
So I am an elderly person who is still active. I guess that would be a thumbnail. My interest in time banking came because of one of our former students. We had a little school in St. Petersburg, and it was called the Academy for the Gifted, and it was an experimental school, and she was part of it. So when she ran into me in Tampa, both of us relocated. She said, "You need to join the Time Bank. Come and meet Marie Nelson," which I did. And that many years ago began my introduction to time banking. Marie turned out to be a good friend, and I made other friends during that period of time. One was a woman that I invited to join who had been part of my census crew. So that gives you a space and time when you know this was happening. And I was a crew leader for part of Tampa, and she was one of my enumerators. Wow. And she was a little younger than me, and she had been a student of Marie's at the University of South Florida. So she remembered Marie as a teacher of teachers, right, and her best teacher. So through the time that I was with it, I learned a lot and made lots of friends. And then at some point, my husband, who was older than I, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I became primarily a caregiver with hospice services provided to him. So I can talk about lots of things in my life with him and my many time banking exchanges before and after his death. But I wanted this to be a little bit about the relationship of time banking and hospice care, because I think it is a place that is perhaps not well recognized in the time bank lexicon, and a really special function and way that community is built at a time of need.
Good. And it's something that we don't often talk about. We talked for just a couple of minutes briefly before the beginning of the broadcast, and it's like hospice, people wait so long before they get the help from hospice and that. So yeah, talk about what that was like for you and how the Time Bank was integrated into that.
Sure. So I had been a hospice provider for many years. I started out in Citrus County doing social work and bereavement coordination. I knew all the steps. I had all the tricks, in my head. I knew how to do it as a provider. When we moved to Virginia, my husband's home state, rural Virginia, in the mountains, a little town called Rural Retreat, which was just as rural as it sounded. One of the citizens would bring his llama pack to the post office, and the little children could play with his llamas while they got their mail.
Wow, that's rural.
A wonderful, wonderful church community of mountain people, and I still stay in touch with them. But when we moved there, there were no hospice programs, not in that county or the adjacent counties or the other side of the mountain in the part that moved toward Bluefield, anywhere, no hospice. So we started it from scratch. And of course, for me, that's always fun if I can create something that's important that doesn't exist. And my husband helped me do that. We also had a wonderful volunteer board of professional nurses who had their master's degree in nursing and volunteer doctors. We held programs to train the citizenry at the local churches. Wow. It was a pretty exciting business. And so when back here in Florida, after we'd been doing our snowbirding and the hospice was turned over to other people to run, it was a shock to find that I was going to be on the other end of the care program. but I was pretty prepared. You're never prepared, but you're more prepared if you've seen the process 100 times or more.
It looks a whole lot different from the receiving end, though, doesn't it?
Totally different. Totally different. First of all, you suddenly realize that you have no time for anything. Your whole day is taken up with being a compassionate caregiver for somebody you love. So they do have a good support structure of home care with nurses and spiritual support, and they do have a volunteer program. But the Timebank came in very handy also. There were so many friends I had by that time, and they were so concerned about me that they jumped in to do the best they could, not knowing quite what to do, but just being present and offering things.
And these were people that you had been doing time bank exchanges with and knew through Tampa Bay Timebank, right? Okay.
Right. And Marie publicized the fact that I was in this situation. Mm-hmm. And so the word got out. And as a matter of fact, one of my current best buddies lives as far away as Clearwater, which is a long drive. And she found out my situation and offered to help without realizing how far away I was. It took her a long while to get here. And, she just really was unprepared for the duration of the driving. Mm. But we had such a good time together, and it meant so much to her and to me that she remained in touch. And still to this day, we are constant supports for each other. There's some really interesting specifics. There's one woman and her father who helped with structural things. They built a bed for him so he could be outside in the backyard and enjoy the sun. She was like a granddaughter to him. So my husband was a storyteller, and the most amazing thing I thought about end of life with him was that he had so much fun with the whole process. He loved meeting people. When volunteers came, it gave him a new audience for his stories. And they would be captivated by his story, so they would come again and again.
So he did what he loved to do all the way to the end then.
Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
At that time, he was writing a column for the newspapers in the mountains of Virginia, and he wrote it up until the week of his death. Every week there was a new column. So he would dictate the column, and I would edit it and process it for him, and off it would go.
Goodness.
So it is a time now in memory of blessedness. Mm-hmm. And moments stand out. We have locally in an acupuncture clinic a pair of women who are Sikhs. And I don't know, I did not know much about the Sikh spiritual path, but it's one of great love and compassion. Mm. And both of these fine women came to visit him, and they brought me a book that had been written by a hospice person some years ago that I'd never seen, called Final Gifts, that talked about that period of time of confusion that so many people write off as a medical problem, and instead the meaning that comes out of the utterances at that time toward the very end. So I would say that my benefits ranged from a bag of groceries, meals, physical repair of a fence, bringing gifts, surprises, minding him while I would get a little break, maybe out into the front yard, just so many things of that order. And then that emotional support, which can only be given by somebody who really cares and makes so much difference at a time like that. I had a dog who needed surgery. Someone took care of that for me. There were just many, many things like that. I can't even remember them all. Right. But what stands out in addition is the aftercare, because I think many in communities across the United States and the world, suddenly on the other side of a death of somebody they've lived with for, in my case, 46 years, are widowed. And what then? There is a period of great need for some kind of connection and communication.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my best friends, the same woman that I had met in the census, Carol Godwin, went with me to pick up the ashes and to help me pick out the right kind of vase and to figure out what sort of a plaque should be used. And I had assistance in getting back to Virginia for the services. I had a big party in my front yard for all the people who had helped me with the care, the hospice team and the time bankers and all. And one of the members has a beautiful garden in Seminole Heights, and she brought a bouquet of ginger flowers, the most gorgeous bouquet of flowers I think I've ever seen. And then later, she planted ginger in my yard, so now I could grow it myself and go out and pick the flowers.
How nice. How nice. And all of this done by a community of loving, caring people that you met through Tampa Bay Timebank.
Yes, I think the important thing to realize is it comes as an effective relationships rather than as a need for a monetary exchange. So it was not a matter even necessarily of anybody expecting time credits.
Right, right.
It grows out of the relationships that you build. And those are the moments that get us through from one stage of life to another.
To another. So what would you say, aside from this, which was a very, very difficult but meaningful time in your life, what would you say is one of your most fond exchanges or even unusual exchange, something that's happened that you wouldn't expect would be a Timebank exchange, or something that was funny or unusual? Does anything
Well, of course, the latest funny exchange was with you, in which you're in the process of getting ready to sell your mobile home here in Tampa, and you've got this house full of stuff you want to get rid of. So one of the same Timebank members who had been so helpful and like a granddaughter to my husband has a pickup truck and can do almost anything at all. So she volunteered to go down there and get rid of a lot of the things you needed to get removed. Right. And we also are working with the refugee groups who need housing for their Afghanistan refugees that are coming into Tampa.
Right.
So out of that, there was a bed for a refugee family and a television set, a very large television set, and a truck full of other things, which included an IKEA bed. So I think it was last week, that bed was put together in my bedroom and I'm sleeping on it.
Nice. Nice. You never know where things are going to go in the Timebank. You just never know. So if you had to explain Timebanking to somebody that had never heard about it before, can you do that in 2 minutes? Can you encapsulate it and give a 30-second or to a minute? Here's what Timebanking is. How do you explain it?
I think you're the person who's come up with a line on it, and I probably can't quote it exactly, but something about you do what you love to do, and you ask for things that you need and want. And somehow that grid all goes together. With good fortune, there are people who love to give whatever it is you need, and that what you love to do then becomes a blessing to you as well as the person who receives that talent or that skill or that effort or that object. The trading of things that we don't want to people who really do want them is a very big part of time banking.
It's a huge part of time banking. And does much to keep things out of the landfill. And, that exchange that you talked about, I just needed stuff gone. I was staging the place. I wanted it to look nice. We didn't have room for the bed and some other items. And, there went the truck and I didn't care. It was gone. My need was taken care of. And then to find out from you, a month later or something that the bed was coming to you, I'm like, oh my God, full circle. It's just beautiful. So tell me, Rita, what do you think what would you like to see in the time banking community, either there in Tampa Bay Timebank or worldwide? Because this is a worldwide movement. So one or the other or both. What would you, if you had, a million wishes and could wish something good upon time banking, how do you see it? What would you like it to look like?
So locally, we're lucky because we have Timebank in Florida from Gulfport in Pinellas County up to Spring Hill, which is about 50 miles north of me. So it's a big expanse of both small community, town, city, big city. Tampa's a big city, and rural time banking in a geographic swath. We have two different software systems engaged in it, but we have goodwill from one end of the group to the other, and a big population that we're reaching. So my dream, my fantasy is that we will maximize shared skills within that cross section of humanity, so that each time bank can learn from the other and get more proficient. And there are moments in time when things are just supposed to happen naturally. Yeah. And I just have the feeling that this is the moment for that. We've been doing it. The podcasts themselves are part of it.
Yes.
I would not be doing this podcast, this web recording, this type of storytelling if you were not instigating it, if you were not the person who had the skills to put it together, but you are. And so we can share our talents from one time bank to another. But, one of the stories that Spring Hill tells is of the family from Great Britain, from England. I guess it was two women who had heard about time banking there, and they wanted to come to Orlando. They wanted to come, of course, for the theme parks in Orlando. But time banking was probably the second thing on their minds, amazingly. And so they arrived with no automobile and somehow made it into Tampa. And their goal was to hook up with Spring Hill Timebank, which was quite a distance north of them,
right,
and have an evening of Timebank sharing. And we had probably 4 different people collaborate in making that possible. One person even drove them back to Orlando after they spent the night in Andy's house. Amazing. And so it was a very, very funny and touching story of Timebank sharing on the international level.
We'll have to see if we can get Andy on one of these and give him to tell the story. He's a great storyteller. Well, Rita, that's it. We're trying to keep these to about 15 minutes, and we've reached the end of the time already. It's gone so quick. Thank you for being on our anthology series and giving us a little hint of what time banking looks like for you and what it's done in your life. We really appreciate you being here today. This is BJ from St. Pete Timebank signing off on our Time Banking Tales, a Storybank.